What's up, everybody? This is your boy Chainsaw. Listen, there has been a ton happening in the last couple of weeks. We've got so much to cover. Let's just jump right into it. There is some good news, at the very least, here in Missouri. We have a chance, however small chance, of getting the old Republican Party back. This may not be the best news, but at least some are focusing on policy issues rather than the culture war. Some. So there is hope of, some sort of normalcy returning to politics. No matter how bad their policies are, it's significantly better than the culture war issues that we've been facing lately. And so I want to just jump into this. It's the Republican Party back to its same old tricks, right? Tax breaks for the rich and breadcrumbs for the rest. This was published by KOMU. 8 on April 21st, Missouri's House's $500 tax credit bill heads to the Senate. So Jefferson City, the Missouri House of Representatives passed House Bill 3021 Thursday, which gives Missourians a tax credit by a 103 to 44 vote. Representative Cody Smith, Republican from Carthage, introduced the bill on April 11th. The bill would give Missourians with tax liability a $500 credit, and married couples who file jointly, a $1,000 credit. And Missourians will receive a tax credit if they have paid their tax liabilities and have had money withheld from their liabilities. Smith was pleased with the bill passing. We've already spent enough this fiscal year, and we have more money still, Smith said. We think Missouri taxpayers should get their money back, and that they would know what to do with it better than we do. After last year and Mikey P withholding unemployment checks from everyone who was due unemployment from, May until August? I mean, I'm sure they have tons of money left to budget out, right? Not all House representatives were pleased with the bill. The bill will not give any tax credits to those who make less than $12,500, which is the standard deduction, right? Or if they have a majority of their income made through Social Security, which is people who have already spent their entire lives working, paying taxes. On Wednesday, Representative Peter Meredith proposed an amendment that would give a tax credit to Missourians making less than $100,000 and $200,000 for married couples. But this failed, and I believe... correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this was basically a $1,000 stimulus check he wanted to give to the bottom tier of Missourians, folks who work their whole lives and are now collecting the Social Security check, or are still working and will continue to work for the rest of their lives and are making less than the standard deduction, which is significantly less than poverty. That failed. That was not even a thing. Meredith voted against the bill, believing it does not help all Missourians. We'll get to that. I think it covers in the article how that doesn't actually, there's no cap on that. So, literally, Johnny Morris would also get the same tax deduction that you or I would after the standard deduction. I heard we're giving back to the people that need it the most, everyday Missourians, but this bill does not do that, Meredith said. Unless you think the third of Missourians working low-wage jobs or on fixed incomes aren't everyday Missourians, maybe that is what you think. You think they are not everyday Missourians. Representative Lakeisha Bosley, a Democrat from St. Louis City, agreed that the bill does not cover enough Missourians. I think that it is deplorable for us to not vet this thoroughly through. Ugh. Bosley said, so the people who are in 114 counties and a city not in a county across the whole state get as much relief as possible. Representative Doug Ritchie, Republican from Clay, disagreed with his Democrat colleagues and believes the bill is a step to easing financial worries amongst Missourians, except for those who are actually facing financial struggles that may otherwise leave them homeless or hungry or both. We are going to provide some tax relief to those who have state income tax liability, Ritchie said. What they do with their money is their business, and the state does not have any concerns with that. Where was he when Mike Parson cut unemployment? I'm just saying. The Missouri Senate has until May the 6th to approve the bill before the current legislature returns for the session. So that in itself was interesting enough. But yeah, I guess there was quite the conversation that erupted on the House floor between Representative Meredith and one GOP representative, Shane Roden. Let me see if I can pull this up here. And good news, Cash, Coffee, and Chaos does have that video in full, and I'm going to play it for you now.
And gentleman from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I inquire the gentleman from St. Louis City?
Gentleman from St. Louis City, do you yield and do you have a clear path?
Close.
And I do. Thank you.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm kind of confused. I'm hearing one side of the argument I've heard for the last 6 years now. We're not spending enough money from you. I've heard that complaint year after year after year. You're unhappy with how much money we spend in the state of Missouri.
Correct.
How much money is good enough? How much money do we need to spend? I'm just out of curiosity. If you had a blank checkbook, what's enough?
There's the gotcha. But wait for the response.
Well, it's going to depend on each individual institution, but I would say enough to be competitive with other states in how we fund higher education, in how we fund K-12, in how not to be the lowest paid teachers in the country, how not to have the least funding for our schools in the country, how not to have the worst funding for public transportation in the country. Do you want me to go on? Because that's what it is.
Gentlemen, let's you talk about comparing us. Do you know what gas prices are in California right now?
I don't.
The last I checked, it was somewhere up to $6 or $7 a gallon.
Okay.
What do you know how much you paid for it here in Missouri?
Just under $4, anywhere from $3.50 to $4 over the last few months.
Yeah, most I've seen right around $3.80 if you're in
$3.85, I think is what I paid this
I've
weekend.
seen some for $3.50 still last night. There's a cost of living difference, isn't there?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So you can't sit here and say, well, we have the lowest paid teachers in the state in this country when you're comparing us to California. You can't compare the two.
Well, just to be clear, California is not the only other state on the list. I'm comparing us to our neighboring states.
$40,000 here, and you're paying a teacher in California $110 here.
And you can use California as the far extreme, but what about the states right around us?
Oregon, we can use Washington.
What about Kansas,
Illinois,
Oklahoma, Indiana, Tennessee? What about the rest of the Midwest?
And how many schools do we have in those areas? And how many are impaired in their superintendents?
How many schools do we have in those areas? What are you saying?
How many teachers are in the state of Kansas versus the state of Missouri?
I don't know the answer to that.
The population is actually quite different in the state of Missouri than the state of Kansas.
Yeah, I'm talking about per capita funding, gentlemen.
Okay, per capita, okay.
And teacher pay is per teacher, of course, so.
But you don't take in the cost of living. So anyways, going back to the original.
Do you think our cost of living is that dramatically different from Kansas? Or Indiana, or Tennessee, or Oklahoma?
You got to compare apples and oranges, gentlemen.
I think
you're comparing apples and oranges.
You tried to compare us to California. I'm trying to compare us to similarly situated states.
You want to go to Illinois? I mean, they're in a great wonderful shape.
Yeah, they get paid. Their teachers get paid a lot more money.
They still owed for their electric bill for their capital. They were being threatened to have their electric turned off at their state capital because they didn't pay their bill.
Okay.
They're not exactly in the greatest.
You notice I didn't use them as my point of how we could do better. Because they've got problems in a different way, no question. But Indiana?
So the question is, when is enough for you, gentlemen? I've
when our
never heard
institutions have the resources they need, when our teachers have the resources they need, when our kids have the health care they need, when our seniors have the support they need.
If that's the case, gentlemen, then we should have freezed the seniors' income or the assessed valuations on their houses. We haven't done that in 8 years. If we're going to do that, then let's talk about
money from our schools in a different
gentlemen,
direction.
how we pay superintendents to get $300,000 a year, or principals making an exorbitant amount of money compared to the teachers. Don't sit here and
maybe if you want to fix the high cost of executives, we can actually control that with the tax code in the private sector. Because when the nonprofit and public sector have to compete for executives with the private sector, and your side is saying, well, they should be able to pay whatever they want, $1 million executives, how are our institutions supposed to compete with them except by paying comparable wages for executives?
private versus government.
Yes,
gentlemen.
and if you want government to compete with the private sector and be run like the private sector, then either or both, we have to put more limits on the private sector, or we have to allow for things like that in the public sector, which is competitive pay.
Yeah,
One or the other, or we just run our state into the ground like we've been doing for the last 20 years.
So the other question I have, gentlemen, are we better off giving these individuals $1,000 back a year, or in this one time for a joint household? Are we better off maybe reducing their taxes by almost $1,600 a year?
Well, I would prefer one time while we have a surplus, or my preference is we reinvest it in our state institutions that I just said have been starved for the last 2 decades.
So you just want to spend more money of other people, you just want to spend more of other people's money?
Taxpayer dollars, so our money, collectively, yes.
Collectively. So
Each of us in here is a taxpayer as well. And I represent 35,000 taxpayers that would like us to invest their dollars wisely, not give them back to millionaires.
Boom. Because again, keep in mind with this tax break, Johnny Morris is also going to be getting his tax break just as well. Just saying, he's got a point.
Gentlemen,
That's what my constituents have said.
I'm just amazed, and I'm glad this is the last time I have to deal with a budget in this side of the chamber, because every year I've always heard from you is that we never spend enough money. It's never enough.
Boy,
it's
I'd love
never
that to
enough.
change.
And even when we spend more money every year, gentlemen, when I first came in here, we spent $24 billion.
We spend 15% less than 10 years ago on higher education. We spend $10 million less on public transportation than 20 years ago. We have cut our school transportation funding all the way down to 35% of their need. What are you talking about?
But we fund the education formula. We do all this other stuff. We spend more money every year on programs.
Yeah, after we change the foundation formula to be a lower target than it used to be. Look, we magically now fully fund it.
We take it back to the original foundation formula.
Lowest paid teachers in the country, lowest funded schools in the country, gentlemen.
Gentlemen, none of us can hear you. Please continue.
I thought we were being plenty loud, gentlemen.
I could hear you.
I hear you too.
Gentlemen, it's never been enough. We change the formulas multiple times. We go back to it. One side uses it, the other side, and all it does is bicker back and forth about it's talking points of we don't spend enough money. And yet every year we spend $10,000 to $11,000 per student.
Well, gentlemen,
it keeps going up every year.
Here I am suggesting we give it back to folks.
I understand that, gentlemen. But
if you
we
don't want to spend it, let's give it to folks that need it.
But you talk out both sides. You want to give hardworking people a break, but if we were to bring up something about income tax reductions.
As we just talked about, a third of the population doesn't pay income tax. How does an income tax reduction help working class folks? It doesn't. That's the point. You want to get rid of a sales tax on groceries? I'm all in. Let's do that.
So a 1% tax on groceries that's going to save maybe $100, $150 a year.
And this will give them
giving
zero. Somebody and this will give those same people zero. $0. That's what this bill, without my amendment, would do. $0 for those people. Zero.
Gentlemen, they didn't put anything into the system.
They paid property taxes, sales taxes. They pay more of their income in sales taxes a year than higher income folks do. That's a fact. Why is your side ignoring that reality?
And that's what it all boils down to, in essence, is that a third of Missourians, as was stated, are working class folks who work every day, or 40 hours a week, but do not make enough money for the standard deduction. Therefore, they do not deserve representation in the state of Missouri. Talk about saying the quiet part out loud. Wow.
So, gentlemen,
and suggesting they haven't paid in because they haven't paid
You're telling me
taxes.
that a low-income person pays more or buys more stuff than somebody else.
Higher percentage of their income, gentlemen.
Okay, I can't control what you spend, gentlemen. Why is that my responsibility?
Because you spend on the things you need.
Gentlemen,
like transportation, like food.
That's a load of something.
It's a load of reality, bro.
Not everybody spends on what they need. Gentlemen, thank you for the inquiry. It's been fun. I'm glad this is my last time having to deal with budget.
Me too, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So, thank goodness for folks. Thank goodness for folks like GOP Representative Shane Roden. And I'm me, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least on this issue, right? Because is it culture war-ish? Yeah, sure, but policy, tax policy, that's something that's pretty black and white that can be debated and should be debated. Folks on each side can make good talking points and convince others of their ilk, and specifically convince the voters as to who or what will be affected. Like that's a real legitimate. I mean, I don't even know why this should even be a discussion. It's a policy issue that is debatable. It's not a full-on culture issue. It's not, anti-LGBTQ legislation. It's not, anti-abortion legislation. It's not something that's infringing on people's right to exist. I mean, it sort of is, because poor people got to eat and have places to live and pay their bills and, but you get my point. It's a policy issue, and this is something that we do not often see from the Republicans, who have only been running on culture issues. Now, that being said, thank goodness even more for folks like Representative Peter Meredith, who bring common sense and calculable evidence to the table. But with that, we're going to take a quick break and jump right back into it. Webull is the stock app and trading platform that everybody's using, and I mean everybody's using. You've seen it all over YouTube. I use it on my own channel to show what's happening in the market. You pay 0 commission fees. You can own fractional shares. You can even trade in cryptocurrencies and access real-time market data. Use my referral link, chainsawccc.com/Webull. That's chainsawccc.com/Webull, Webull, and get you 2 free stocks. Simply by opening an account and depositing any amount, get you 2 free stocks from Webull. Believe me, you're going to want this one. All right, we're back. And now for the piece de resistance, what you've all been waiting for, the number one reason why most folks tune into news commentary in the first place. The culture war stuff. And what would be any good culture war without anti-abortion legislation? So let's take a look at that. And I'm going to jump around just a little bit here, and you'll see why. So this is from March 22nd. Springfield News Leader, that's Springfield, Missouri, not the other 5. House Committee approves bill limiting abortion drugs, removes ectopic pregnancy language. Ectopic pregnancy language. Most of the fellers, running around with beards are probably scratching them right now, being like, "Oh, what's that, chainsaw?" Look, if you don't know what a tubal pregnancy is by now, like, I don't know, your Google machine must be broken. You have to take it to the Google mechanic, get the Google fluid checked, right? And then when you get a chance, of course, an ectopic pregnancy, also known as a tubal pregnancy, Mayo Clinic. I'm not going to explain it to you. We're going to go with the Mayo Clinic. It's because it's out of my league. A tubal pregnancy, the most common type of ectopic pregnancy, happens when a fertilized egg gets stuck on its way to the uterus, often because the fallopian tube is damaged by inflammation or is misshapen. Hormonal imbalances or abnormal development of the fertilized egg might also play a role. The most important part, and this is again from clevelandclinic.org, can a tubal pregnancy survive? Unfortunately, no. An ectopic pregnancy is fatal for the fetus. It cannot survive outside of the uterus. So, no viable baby. Period. No viable baby. What's worse? It can kill you. Maybe not you, but it can kill the person who is having the ectopic pregnancy. If you are pregnant with an Jesus, we're gonna have to cut this. If you are pregnant with a tubal pregnancy, an ectopic pregnancy, not only does that not create a viable baby for all the anti-abortion people out there, again, does not create a viable baby, but it will kill you. Like, it will kill you. The fertilized egg can't survive outside the uterus. If left to grow, it may damage nearby organs and cause life-threatening loss of blood. Symptoms include pelvic pain, vaginal bleeding. To prevent complications, treatment is needed. In the early stages, medication may be sufficient. Later stages require surgery. So, these sick jokers in the Missouri legislature, these sick, disgusting, I don't have words for it, but they're just horrible, horrible, disgusting people. Specifically, who sponsored this bill, and this is, I believe, HB 2810. These sick, disgusting people proposed a bill that would include, and I believe at that point it was a Class A felony for terminating an ectopic pregnancy, for terminating a pregnancy that will not only not create a baby, but will kill the mother if she doesn't get it treated. Without an abortion, she dies. With an abortion, she goes to prison. Okay? This is what the Republican Party is down to. Okay? Look, there's no way to justify this. There is absolutely no way to justify this whatsoever. Let me pull this up here. So the updated article, this is from ABC 17, Fox 22. Pull this in. Thousands march against abortion in Jefferson City as efforts ramp up nationwide. This was published just a few days ago, April 20th. Jefferson City, Missouri, KMIZ. Despite the rainy weather, thousands gathered in the capital city Wednesday for Midwest March for Life. The annual anti-abortion event drew more than 2,000 people in 2021. The march began in 2010 as a way to commemorate the historic 1973 Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision. The fate of the decision to legalize abortion in the United States is up in the air as the court considers a request for Mississippi to overturn Roe v. Wade. Sounds like a lot of these folks need to read a freaking book. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, Missouri has a trigger law put in place already that would automatically ban abortions in the state. Pro-Choice Missouri Executive Director Mallory Schwartz said she expects the Supreme Court to overturn the nearly 50-year-old judgment because of its political ideologies of the justices. Missouri has only one, count them, one abortion clinic, a Planned Parenthood in St. Louis. While losing Roe would be a blow to the nation, Roe has never been sufficient in protecting our rights and our access to abortion, Schwartz said. And so we expect Missourians will face similar hardships they're facing right now. Speakers at the March for Life rally were in favor of the High Court overturning Roe v. Wade. We think it's best to see it overturned, said Thrive Nation CEO Bridget Van Means. It looks like it will go to the states, and the states can each decide. And of course, we're thrilled to be here in Missouri because, of course, Missouri is a state that affirms men. And, of course, empowers and equips women. That sounds like it's the opposite. Several states have passed sweeping anti-abortion legislation, such as Texas's 6-week ban. Missouri lawmakers are considering several anti-abortion bills. House Bill 2810, so I was right, sponsored by Representative Brian Seitz, Republican from Branson, would ban any abortions after 10 weeks. This legislation also applies to ectopic pregnancies. Again, this was published on the 20th of this month. This legislation also applies to ectopic pregnancies, which are dangerous to the mother and do not produce a viable fetus. No baby, dead mother, or you created a felon. So if you get pregnant in Missouri and it just so happens that this happens to you, you have two choices. Die per orders of the Republican Party, or go to prison per orders of the Republican Party. Because of your bad luck, kid. That's rough. This bill passed out of committee in the House of Representatives and is on the informal calendar for perfection in the full chamber. House Bill 2012, sponsored by Representative Hannah Kelly, a Republican from Mountain Grove, which is just the hub of forward thinking in general. also seeks to ban abortions. Representative Mary Elizabeth Coleman, Republican from Arnold, introduced an amendment that would prevent Missourians from crossing state lines to get an abortion. This bill has a public hearing in a Senate committee Wednesday morning, the same day as March for Life. So look, all you small town, small government conservatives in South Central Missouri, there's nothing bigger than your state rep decrying that you do not have the right to go to a different state and follow their laws. That's really, 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 really big government for you folks with, rosacea. Midwest March for Life events took place from 7:45 a.m. to at least 2 p.m. Wednesday. Author Abby Johnson spoke in the Capitol Rotunda and signed books. Several local churches lent support to marchers, including the Capitol's neighbor, St. Peter's Catholic Parish. Bishop Sean McKnight was one of the speakers, as well as the Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft. Wow. Oh, so that's the end of it. Okay. Yep. Wow. Just wow. Wow. Can't even with this. Now, just to throw a little salt in the wound there, literally the day after that article was published, there was another hearing in the Missouri House, of course. Let me pull this up. A Missouri bill would punish providers for medical treatment on transgender children. What? Talk about culture war stuff. I mean, we are just... Maybe I spoke too soon about the Republican Party at the state level in Missouri being rational. Clearly, mistakes were made. So my apologies to those who might have expected a little bit of change, however deranged it was, because it's only going to get more and more deranged from here. So my apologies to the viewer. Our good friend Peter Meredith, Representative Meredith, had posted same day on his social media. The bill sponsor filed a different bill to prevent schools. So to prevent schools from requiring kids have any vaccine if their parents don't want them. Because she believes that parents should have the absolute right to make healthcare decisions for their own kids. Okay. But how about when a parent is facing the complex scenario of a child with gender dysphoria or any complex gender identity, and after years of counseling and medical advice, concludes that puberty blockers or hormone therapies to allow their kids time until they're old enough to make more decisions. We're going to stop that because parents do not actually have the right to speak of what sort of medical treatment that their children have. So saith, not just so saith the Republican Party, but in this case, so saith one Republican legislator. For hours on Thursday, Missouri lawmakers debated a bill that would punish doctors and healthcare providers if they provided procedures and treatment to transgender children. Representative Susie Pollock, sponsor of HB 2649. Hypocrite? She calls it the Missouri Save Adolescents from Experimentation Act, or SAFE. Wow. Save Adolescents from Experimentation. I thought letting parents decide what they want to do with their children as far as their health care was, I thought before, like 6 weeks ago, you thought that was safe. Now it's your job to decide what sort of medical treatment kids get. Was Eric Schmidt? Are you there? Is that you? It just sounds really, it prohibits any physician or other healthcare professional from providing gender transition procedures to a child under 18 or referring the child to any healthcare professional for those procedures. The bill also prohibits any health insurance company or health benefit plan from reimbursing gender transition procedures to kids under 18. Representative Peter Meredith, who represents St. Louis, was one of the committee members listening to testimony for and against the bill. It says this bill would take away tools from doctors like puberty blockers and hormone treatments, he said. Pollock told the committee she believes this treatment can cause harm. Now, she's not a doctor, okay? These drugs can sterilize children and never allow them to experience an orgasm. It's a Republican saying this. This is the Republican talking point. So for all you social conservatives out there, you just got real uncomfortable. Me too. Do you want to do that to a child? Do you want to strip them of that? My God. Is there a doctor in the house? If they go all the way through it, they are never content. People who are fully trans, they don't have normal sexual function. You are stealing that from children. She said, my main goal is to protect children. Now, they've been doing this I believe it's called gender affirming care as a head topic. They've been doing this for well near, if not over a decade, to the best of my knowledge. However, Pollock said that there were no firsthand testimonies from witnesses because they want to protect the children. They don't have anybody over 18 that they could ask about this already. I'm just saying, like, nobody in the whole world. They couldn't pull somebody from California to ask. That's weird, because down here, supporters of the bill said there are potential risks and outcomes of the procedures. Pollock said constituents told her it was in their second visit when they were referred to a gender clinic. But several testimonies against the bill discussed the complicated process is not on a whim, or these extensive discussions can take time. The argument was also made that children may not know what's best for them. Those against the bill are organizations like Promo. They believe it would cause more harm than good, and there's nothing safe about the bill. Katie Erker Lynch is an executive director for Promo, which confronts systemic inequities to liberate the full spectrum of LGBTQ plus community from discrimination and oppression. It's been well documented that when we do not give trans youth access to gender affirming care, it can contribute to depression, feelings, social isolation, and internalized transphobia or self-hatred, risk of self-harm, and suicidal behaviors, Erker Lynch said. Shira Berkovitz is the senior director of the public policy and advocacy at Promo and is fighting for accessibility to healthcare. They share their own story about being a triplet and knowing they felt out of place in their own skin. Said, I felt foreign in my body. They have a message for other kids too. We are you, we see you, and we care deeply about you. And we will not stop fighting this legislation on your behalf, Berkovitz said. Dr. Lori Haynes testified in support of the bill. She's a psychologist and a board member for the International Federation for Therapeutic and Counseling Choice. She said she's written research on gender dysphoria. The what? The International Federation for Therapeutic and Counseling Choice. And she's written research on gender dysphoria. So the IFTCC, let's see if we can pull this up here. Just out of curiosity, right? Home for the once gay, those coming out, and the detransitioners, because we're free to choose. Supporting people with unwanted same-sex attraction and gender confusions. Oh, it's one of those organizations. Many people experience difficulties in such areas, want help in overcoming the feelings. I mean, is this like one step away from Pray Away the Gay? I'm just saying. The IFTCC was established to help people find the support they're looking for by providing preferred access to preferred provider counselors. Many governments are wanting to ban all related counseling or therapy with the aggressive secular culture that has developed towards anyone who does not want to embrace homosexuality, transsexual ideology. People are left with nowhere to turn. Straight people who are confused, I guess, and just need coaching and counseling to get rid of the... Maybe they just need more prayer. Is that Is that what it is? Is that the business model here? I just, look, you tell me. Hit me up in the comments if that's what that is. But yeah, so again, Dr. Lori Haynes testified in support of the bill. Studies show this mismatch naturally resolves for children if they are not given body-harming interventions. This mismatch naturally resolves for children? Okay. She said this would require lifetime medical treatment. This child abuse must stop. Dr. Haynes said. In a crosstalk, Dr. Haynes was asked if she was in support of conversion therapy. She replied she is in support of it for those who voluntarily explore to moderate their changes. Those opposing the bill were two Washington University doctors. They described the work they do at the Transgender Center at St. Louis Children's Hospital. Dr. Sarah Garwood is an adolescent medicine specialist and is the co-director of the center. Providing gender-affirming care is literally life-saving, she said. In the transgender population, there's a lifetime suicide attempt rate of 40%. Let me repeat that for the folks in the back who just need to hear it. In the transgender population, there's a lifetime. We're not talking about before the age of 18, 21, 35, 62. In the transgender population, there's a lifetime suicide attempt rate of 40%, with the majority of those attempts prior to the age of 19. I want to skip ahead, but I'm not going to, but keep that in mind. Dr. Garwood said with medical interventions, there's evidence of improving that statistic. She pointed out, even if treatment was banned, gender exploration will not stop. Transgender medical care is evidence and guided by standards of care and support by American Academy of Pediatric. This bill is contrary to what I have in the good fortune in my training and contrary to my national standards, Dr. Garwood notes. Dr. Garwood said in their Center for Children who haven't hit puberty yet, the focus is on psychological, social support, and family education. After puberty starts, other options become available like puberty blockers, hormone treatment. They're mostly seeing mental health professionals talking about ways to feel more comfortable in their bodies. And when indicated, we talk about gender-affirming hormones. Not every teen needs to begin hormones or puberty blockers before 18. But let me be clear, for those who do, hormones save lives, she said. She also points out the medical interventions are done with a multidisciplinary team approach. Mental health assessment and consent must be made from the child and their guardians. Surgeries are under the age of 18 are not recommended. Dr. Christopher Lewis is the other co-director and pediatric endocrinologist. Most studies examining the impact of these therapies show a decrease in negative life outcomes, substance abuse, suicide, and depression, Dr. Lewis said. They shared that about 1 to 3% of people have detransitioned. 1 to 3%, and there are multiple reasons why this happens. Both sides discuss the importance of mental health and reduction of suicide rates. However, the goal to get there looked different. What's next? There are 3 weeks left, and and of course, because we're a super red state, the Republican Party is going to get whatever BS it wants to. Look, it's sick, it's disgusting, but where does all this come from? Boy, this sounds familiar, right? I mean, Florida, has just been bringing this up. It seems to have been making big news here lately. And we're going to talk about another way that this wackadoodle basically pray away your gender identity has been making some big news in the independent media world. We're going to talk about that in a second. A real quick break. See you then. If day trading is too stressful or you just don't want to deal with the volatility of the market, M1 Finance has got you covered. This easy-to-use trading platform basically lets you build your own index fund out of companies that you believe it. And if you use my link at chainsawccc.com/M1, M1 Finance will give you a free $30 just for signing up and funding your M1 account. Get started today. chainsawccc.com/M1. $30 is waiting for you, bro. So speaking of gender affirming care and its recent rise in the news, Politico released this article, also on 420. Florida releases guidance clashing with HHS. Advice on transgender kids. What? Florida knows best, right? Florida's health department published a memo claiming that minors should not receive hormone therapies, puberty blockers, or gender reassignment surgery. Florida Department of Health on Wednesday offered new guidance on transition-related medical care for young people, bucking advice given by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Medical experts, including the American Medical Association, because Florida knows better. Florida's health department published a memo claiming that minors should not receive hormone therapies, puberty-blocking drugs, or gender reassignment surgery. Instead, Florida's health agency states that children and adolescents should be provided social support by peers and family and counseling from a licensed provider. The memo serves as guidance and is not a rule or regulation. Well, that's good because, you know, here in Missouri, we're getting to hear from folks who, well, I think I've said pray away the gay enough times to get that through your noggins. The agency released the memo in response to a gender reaffirming care fact sheet that was published by HHS last month. The HHS fact sheet states that gender affirming care for minors is crucial to overall health and well-being, as it allows the child or adolescent to focus on social transitions and increase their confidence while navigating the healthcare system. It can include what's called social affirmation, such as wearing gender affirming hairstyles, clothes, puberty blockers, hormone therapies, surgeries, though HHS notes that surgical procedures are typically used for adults, and that was also mentioned in Missouri, so it's, you know, I guess a lot of folks are talking about it not really being a thing. They're not trying to just chop up kids. You know, sounds about right to me. In addition, medical associations, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Medical Association, support gender-affirming care for adolescents, but medical experts said gender-affirming care for children rarely, if ever, includes surgery even. So, like, what else do you need, bro? Instead, doctors are more likely to recommend counseling, social transitioning, and hormone replacement surgery, or therapy. Therapy. My God, that was a faux pas. Florida Surgeon General Joseph A. Lopado accused HHS of publishing its fact sheet for political and not for medical reasons. Then they went ahead and did the exact same thing after you accused. There's a lot of projection coming out of Florida. I'm just saying, like, you know, if I hadn't read it here, I probably wouldn't have known that Matt Gaetz wasn't the Surgeon General. It's a lot of projection coming out of Florida, okay? Yo, both the fact sheet and DOH memo link to serve academic studies and research papers, which were completed by organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics. The federal government's medical establishment releasing guidance failing the most basic level of academic rigor shows that this was never about healthcare, Lopado wrote. It was about injecting political ideology into the health of our children. They're going to give kids gender-affirming surgery and cut their genitals, and then they're going to implant them with critical race theory nanobots. And Florida's legislation, titled Parental Rights in Education, but dubbed Don't Say Gay, by opponents, is just one of dozens of state house proposals across the country that LGBTQ supports say are harmful or anti-trans. They include bill banning transgender athletes from participating in women's sports, to rule on which bathrooms transgender youth or adults can use. HHS did not immediately respond to questions about Florida's guidance. The federal agency's 2-page document was generated as part of a campaign launched by HHS Secretary Javier Becerra in response to Abbott's February ruling, which a judge halted in March. And apologies if I murdered the first name there. I'm just defaulting to classical. These actions are clearly dangerous to the health of transgender youth in Texas. Becerra wrote in the statement, at HHS, we listen to medical experts and doctors, and they agree with us that access to affirming care for transgender youth is essential and can be life-saving. The HHS Transgender Support campaign also included a notice from the agency's Office for Civil Rights, which pledges to defund anyone who is denied medical treatment because of gender status. Parents or caregivers who believe their child has been denied health care, including gender-affirming care on the basis of that child's gender identity, may file a complaint with OCR, the notice says. It's all over the place. So here in Missouri, we're considering an initiative like this actually on, at the legislative level to stop gender-affirming care. The Florida Health Department is basically just going through and trying to, make Ron DeSantis basically campaigning for his presidential candidacy in 2024. I mean, what else do you call that? That is exactly what that is. But between states across the country, floating this garbage, and they're putting it out, like I say, by people like the IFTCC, who basically their whole gig is, anything, literally anything, but allowing gay and trans people to just be gay and trans people to just exist. No hormone blockers. They need therapy, but they need therapy to make them not want to be trans and to maybe, make them cis and straight. I mean, what next? Seriously, what next? I mean, we all know what's next, but, so where does this kind of garbage come from, and why is it so widespread? I mean, hell, even just the other day, we had seen. If you follow me on social media, you might have seen some pretty wild posts that I'd made about some of the things that I saw in the Twitterverse, between J.K. Rowling, everybody's favorite children's story author since Tolkien, and pretty much anybody who is not an anti-trans bigot and who has a Twitter account responding, because apparently J.K. Rowling is very much on Team TERF. She also tweeted a video by one of these whack job quack doctors who, is a part of an organization very much like this other organization that is anti-gender affirming care, and just throws propaganda to the wind. And she got called out on it. She got called out on it pretty hard in some instances. What was it? Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report. I don't have it in front of me here, but I posted on this on social media. And his response to her posting anti-trans propaganda of this very nature, his response was, how did he put it so eloquently? Go F yourself, transphobic trash. She screenshotted it. Mike Figueredo, say he's not huge. I mean, he's a progressive, talk radio guy, has a, political commentary. He does what I does, except like with nicer TVs and a way cooler background. But, you got a bigger following than me, but like she's got like millions of followers, and like she's a literal billionaire who lives in a literal castle. And she has literal millions of followers on her Twitter. She screenshotted his tweet of him saying, go F yourself, and calling her transphobic trash. retweeted it and, sent the mob after him. They went absolutely insane. Called him everything from an incel to, making fun of his member. And, just everything you could possibly think of. They called him a pedophile, said that he was abusive, and, basically made it out like this guy who called her transphobic trash and told her to go F herself was, in some way a misogynist. And I guess you could make the argument that that's, what would you say? Ironic misogyny, if you wanted to. I mean, what Vaush said about her was way, way worse. That I think you could definitely probably call ironic misogyny. But, just because Mike Figueredo is a man and he did tell her to go F herself and such, and called her trash, I guess. They tore into him, literal, maybe not millions, but literal hundreds of people on Twitter just tore into him, the mob. Now he referred to it as his Uno, and now keeping in mind before I get into that, keep in mind that Emma Vigeland, and again probably mispronouncing her last name also, Emma Vigeland, the co-producer of the Majority Report, and co-host of the Majority Report, took up for him. She, I believe, had posted something along the lines of, "I'm so sorry that you're facing consequences for your bigotry outside of your preferred context. My heart bleeds for you," which, she's a woman. So is this also abusive? Well, Team Turf, and I say Team Turf because literally that's the person's name on Twitter. Team Turf says, telling J.K. Rowling to go F yourself isn't a consequence, it's abuse which you apparently support and condone. It's unacceptable. But is it abuse? I mean, is it really? If you wanted to make the argument that it was abusive for Mike Figueredo to call her trash and tell her to go F herself, okay. I guess I could go with that. Is it abusive if someone like Emma Vigeland, who is a woman, calls her trash and tells her to go F herself? Because again, of the transphobic propaganda that J.K. Rowling is posting on Twitter, and Twitter's kind of known for, it's the volatility of its posts, and the things that posters say. So is that abusive when Emma Vigeland does it, even though she's a woman? Mike Figueredo refers to his Uno reversal card. He says that if he's a misogynist, then so be it. Everyone who criticizes him for his comments in that way is now a homophobe because he's a gay man. I would go one further and say that because he's of Hispanic and Trans-Siberian ancestry, that he could claim that they're all a bunch of racists too. Either way, that's one bigotry for two bigotries, whose tree's bigger. I'm just saying. Now, I can't take credit for finding this. It was actually brought to my attention by another political commentator, but definitely a good read. Highly recommended. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but it's The Reactionary Trap by Seth Moskovitz, and he published this in Persuasion January 14th, so long before all this stuff started happening in our mainstream news, right? And he makes reference to Ezra Klein's article about reactionaries on the right, but definitely worth your time. I am going to look over a couple of things, though, and then make a final point. So reactionary is someone with extreme opposition to dramatic or social or political change. Sometimes, of course, dramatic change is destructive, and opposition to it is often justified. What distinguishes the reactionary is that they end up making two key intellectual mistakes: becoming so preoccupied with who or what they are against that the foundation of their politics is reflexive opposition rather than the first principles or reason, vastly inflating the threat of whatever it is that they oppose, driving responses disproportionate to the scale of the harms they critique. These mistakes, which I will call opposition politics and threat inflation, lead reactionaries to conjure up an imaginary phantom and adopt extreme tactics to fight it, tossing nuance aside in the process. It is not hard to see why decent people can succumb to reactionary sympathies. Reactionaries truly believe that, in the words of historian Mark Lilla, whether the society reverses direction or rushes to its ultimate doom depends entirely on their resistance. What room is there for restraint if someone believes they are society's last bulwark against ultimate doom? It's not a good sounding place to be. And again, you see when it comes to what happened on Twitter, when it comes to these gender affirming bans, when it comes to anti-abortion ban, I mean, that's the thing. A lot of this stuff, whether it's on the left or on the right, this anti-abortion stuff is obviously the right wing. A lot of the craziest stuff that we've went over today is on the right wing. J.K. Rowling and Team TERF are typically liberal. She is a supporter of the Labor Party. Most TERFs are supporters of the Labor Party. Most TERFs consider themselves progressive, for, lack of a better way to describe it, here or there. And yet, this explains it all. So it's definitely a slippery slope, and definitely something to be aware of. To be quite honest, it makes me think of, and let me pull this up here, because just to make sure I'm on 100% the right page, because I don't want to talk too much about this, because I know that that's also a slippery slope. It reminds me of what they used to refer to as the regressive left. Okay, and I know, chainsaws, the reactionary. No, I just want to touch on this just to the point to compare, because I actually find it quite ironic. So a lot of the new atheists, Sam Harris, Professor Richard Dawkins, had made reference to the regressive left being, how do they put it, branch of left-wing politics, accused of being either accepting or sympathetic to things that conflict with liberal policies. And a lot of times that also included Islamism, right? Or just Islam in general. I mean, everybody's seen the Bill Maher and Sam Harris, takedown of Ben Affleck on Bill Maher's show, right? So that would be one of those moments where they would refer to Ben Affleck as being a regressive leftist. Now, and maybe this is where things get skewed, but I actually thought it was kind of funny to see someone like Tabernacle mention his disdain for Bill Maher and Professor Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and new atheists and new atheism in general, while at the same time speaking in support of Mike Figueredo and his takedown of J.K. Rowling. I guess it's because he's friends with Mike Figueredo. Maybe, I don't know. It seems weird to me, and that's, I'm not judging. That's, I'm not looking for extra internet beef than I already get, but I thought it was weird that somebody like Tabernacle, who typically takes a stance against folks who would use the regressive left, would come in support of someone who would consider J.K. Rowling, I guess, also, I mean, obviously, Mike Figueredo didn't call her the regressive left. I'm calling her the regressive left, if that's what that is, as a reactionary. If you can justify the term regressive left, that would be the best way to do it, is that it's in a reactionary. You can call it the reactionary, whatever it is. It's something that doesn't coincide with left-wing politics, and actually doesn't. Not as a theory, not as a doctrine, not as a whatever. It just doesn't. But I just thought that was weird because, and again, not trying to say anything bad about Tabernacle. I don't know enough about the guy to, go one way or the other. I just thought it was kind of strange that he supports one, doesn't support the other. But then again, you see that all over social media anyway. I mean, on the one hand, just a few weeks ago when Will Smith smacks Chris Rock, everybody's clamoring for Will Smith. Everybody's clamoring for Chris Rock. Some people are attacking Jada Pinkett Smith. Some people are attacking Chris Rock. Some people are attacking Will Smith. But then you kind of notice that the same people who were, attacking Chris Rock for what he said about Jada Pinkett Smith are also not saying anything about, when Jimmy Kimmel, albeit, what's the best way to describe that? Invoked Will Smith to smack Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, it's not okay that Chris Rock says a thing about Jada Pinkett Smith, but it's okay that Jimmy Kimmel wants to use Will Smith to smack Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, isn't that, just it's weird to me. But then also those same, I don't know. I don't get it. Just don't get it. But then again, a lot of people also I've seen who are comparing the Will Smith and Chris Rock thing, or the Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith thing, or the Jada Pinkett Smith thing and the Chris Rock thing with the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard thing. I've seen all sides of that. I've seen people who are comparing, Will Smith and Johnny Depp as if they're both abused men. I've seen people say that they don't like that comparison because Jada Pinkett Smith is not an abuser, and that, that's a completely different circumstance. I've seen people say that they don't like that comparison because, people don't know the inner workings of other people's relationships. But I mean, if we're being completely honest here, I'm going to throw my 2 cents in. I would make the comparison actually between Will Smith and Amber Heard. As far as the courts can tell, and as far as been admitted, Johnny Depp didn't actually strike her, as far as I know. I mean, tell me otherwise, I definitely could change my opinion real quick. But I would make the comparison between Will Smith and Amber Heard. Smacking people is wrong, and if you don't think so, you're a hypocrite, and you're wrong. I don't need to know the inner workings of people's relationships. Apparently that's something that other people value. I don't. Hitting people is wrong, and hitting people because of their feelings is wrong. If Mike Figueredo got his feelings hurt because of what J.K. Rowling posted and he walked up and smacked her, he'd be wrong. If J.K. Rowling got her feelings hurt and smacked Mike Figueredo, she would be wrong. And if you think that smacking people is okay because somebody else got their feelings hurt, you're wrong and you're a hypocrite if you want to call yourself a leftist. I'm just saying. But it's weird. It's a weird world, and my God, if my only hope is that the right wing is imploding in the same way that it seems like the left is, because I don't know what else to say, folks. If there were such a thing as the regressive left, that would be it. So, anyway, thanks for stopping by. Definitely, if you like this kind of content, or if you're confused about this same kind of stuff, tap that subscribe button, hit the notification icon, let you know when the next thing's coming out. Till next time, keep your feet dry.